You say Devinci or Devinci?
Devinci.
That's not how you say it.
Oh, you're French.
Devinci?
Devinci.
Poutine?
It's Québécois.
La poutine?
Maple syrup.
What?
Hey everyone, my name is Sarah Moore and we're here on the Sunshine Coast for the Value Bikes field trip. And if we're talking value bikes, we have to talk about Devinci's recently updated Marshall, which at $2,299 is the least expensive of all of our full suspension bikes here. The Devinci Marshall has 130 millimeters of rear travel paired with a 140 millimeter fork. It comes in 5 sizes, extra small through extra large. The smaller sizes get 27.5 wheels, while the medium, large, and extra large get 29er wheels. The aluminum frame is made in the Canadian brand's manufacturing facility north of Quebec City, and it comes with a lifetime warranty, which is almost as good as a lifetime supply of poutine and maple syrup. The Marshall has a thread and bottom bracket, and then there is protection on both the down tube as well as the chainstay. With a 66.5 degree head tube angle, the Devinci Marshall is actually the steepest full suspension mountain bike that we have on test. It's paired with a 77 degree seat tube angle, which is also one of the steepest that we have here. On our size medium test bike, there's a 460 millimeter reach and a 1,203 millimeter wheelbase. On the size extra small and small bikes with the 27.5 wheels, there's 430 millimeter chainstays, while on the medium, large, and extra large, there's 435 millimeter chainstays. The frame fits a 31/6 dropper post, with drops ranging from 100 millimeters on the smaller size all the way up to 200 millimeters on the larger size. The Devinci's 130 millimeters of rear travel are controlled by a split pivot suspension design. All that means is that the rear pivot rotates concentrically around the axle. Our test bike is the Devinci Marshall 29 Dior 12S, and it retails for $2,299. It comes with a 140 millimeter RockShox 35 silver fork and a Deluxe R debonair rear shock. The Marshall Dior 12S, as you might expect, uses Shimano's 12-speed Dior drivetrain, Dior brakes, Maxxis Minion DHF and DHR tires, and a Trans-X dropper post. One thing to note here, due to supply chain constraints, our bike has SLX brakes, but it'll come with Dior brakes. There aren't any fancy carbon versions of the Marshall, or even any aluminum versions that are more expensive, but there is a SRAM SX version that retails for the same price as the Dior version. Well, there you have it for the details. Let's get into what you really want to know, how it rides out on the trail.
So tell me what you needed to do.
Yeah, so we set up the suspension according to the manufacturer's suggested settings. And then for the fork, RockShox has a handy trailhead app, so we use those recommendations. And then we don't have control tires for these bikes, so we set up the tires, same air pressure for all of the bikes, 21, 23.
So Sarah, none of our value bikes are light. That's not the goal here with these bikes. But the Marshall, didn't it weigh like 49 pounds? No, I'm just joking, everybody. But it's pretty chunky. I think it was 34 pounds, so a couple pounds heavier than the Ibis, which is, to be fair, a bunch more money. But how did that weight feel on the trail?
It does feel like it's very efficient, but at the same time, if you've got a heavy bike, you know, it's funny because you're paying less for a bike and you're getting more, right?
How are you getting more?
You're getting more weight.
Oh, it's heavier. That's like the cheese thing, like the mozzarella cheese with all the holes.
Oh yeah, you're paying more for the Swiss cheese and then you get holes in it. So there's no holes in this
Or helmets, bike helmets are the same.
Yeah, the
you pay
lighter
way
the
more
bike.
for the lighter helmet.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it sounds like what you're saying though is that the Marshall does a reasonable job of hiding that weight on the trail. So I think the question I have for you is, should a $2,300 trail bike be lighter, or are you okay with how much it weighs? Does it matter?
You know, it's not all about weight. And in this category of bike, it doesn't matter as much as if we're looking at like cross-country bikes. So I think I think it's still reasonable that this bike is, 34 pounds and you're gonna feel it a little bit on the climbs, but that's just something you're gonna live with.
It's a good thing that it has efficient suspension, that's for sure.
Exactly, yeah, and that suspension, it's efficient without feeling like you're not able to make it up through routes and stuff. It's not like you're spinning out on every single route because it's like just too efficient,
So let's get into that tech stuff, Sarah. You're in the thick of it. You're in those slippery routes. It's been raining. It's been muddy. What is the Marshall like compared to some of the other bikes?
So if we're looking at that Ibis Ripley, that bike just like accelerates up the climbs. You know, it really has a lot of like pep in its step. And the Marshall to some degree feels more like that bike than it does that to the Giant Trance or the Polygon Siskiyou. Those bikes are super active, whereas the DW Link and the Marshall's Split Pivot Link, they're just a little bit more kind of precise and feel like you can kind of climb more efficiently.
All right, Sarah, you know what comes next? Let's talk about descending. You made it to the top without that lockout lever.
Yeah, somehow.
What happens on the way back down?
You know what? This is a really fun bike to descend. I would say it feels really planted. It feels stable. The position is comfortable. Not the longest travel bike on test here, but it really feels like one of the more confident on the downhills.
Right. So we're going to get right into the comparisons here because we can't get any farther without talking about that Giant Trance X. So that's a 135, 150, so a little bit more travel. Those two bikes on the trail, is the Giant more forgiving? Is the Devinci more forgiving? What's the story?
You know, I would say the Giant Trance is more forgiving, but the Devinci is, you feel a bit more comfortable just like pushing into it, you know, like it's more predictable, it's a little bit more stable, it's not kind of like the active suspension almost kind of not bucks you, but kind of like you're just kind of moving a little bit all the time. So you're kind of front end, back end, and the Devinci just feels very stable. It feels like it can just like, you want to go there and it's going to take you there.
Right. That's the impression that I got with those two bikes as well. The Devinci seems to stay level and planted. Its angles feel like more consistent, where the Giant definitely feels like a way more active bike. And I mean, maybe not in a good way, to be honest. The fork definitely has more dive, whereas the Marshall seemed just more composed than the Giant, didn't it?
Yeah, so it really feels like in smoother sections of trail, you can really just push into it and it accelerates and it feels just more confident.
So it sounds like a good middle ground, maybe a bike for someone who has all sorts of terrain or doesn't know where they're gonna ride the next day.
Yeah, definitely. If you're, you kind of like a wide variety of trails, I would say that the Devinci Marshall is, a bike that you're gonna be comfortable going out when you don't know exactly where your friends are gonna lead you, whether you're doing a little bit more.
Those are the best kind of friends, Sarah.
Yeah. Don't know where you're going, don't know what bike you need, the Devinci Marshall would be a good choice.
All right.
Let's talk about the good stuff.
Yep.
It has that Shimano Dior 12-speed drivetrain.
How did that shift?
It works great,
right?
Even under power. So the Dior 12-speed is awesome, and then it has really great tires. It's got Maxxis Minion DHF and DHR, perfectly suited to this bike.
Yeah, that's worth mentioning too, given this is the least expensive full suspension bike we have on test, and you don't have to upgrade the tires on it. Right out the door, they work great. So those are the good things. Let's talk about the bad, Sarah. Let's start with the brakes.
Yeah, those brakes, it's worth mentioning here that our test bike came with SLX brakes. The bike actually is going to come with Dior brakes, but they're both Shimano brakes, so we may as well talk about that migrating bike point again. By the end of the test period, the bite point is just, you never know where it's going to be. Sometimes you pull the brake lever to the handlebar. Sometimes it's a lot further out. It feels, squishy and then too hard. So it's just a little hard to deal with.
It's inconsistent. Again, we have another test bike with Shimano brakes that are inconsistent. Plenty of power. No issues there. That's for sure. But yeah, just that inconsistent bite point. You don't know where it's going to be when you come flying down the trail. And I don't think that's acceptable, but
I'll take the power of those brakes.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. The other thing we need to talk about is this fork. It has a RockShox 35 fork on the front. What's the deal?
Yeah, so this is the RockShox 35 silver fork, not that gold fork that comes on the Giant Trance.
Right, so that means turnkey damper instead of motion control damper, correct?
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
Okay, yeah.
The fork, it just is a little bit unpredictable. Sometimes it feels like it's oversprung, sometimes it feels like it's undersprung. It's just not it doesn't feel like you expect it to at all times.
Yeah. All right, Sarah, so we're nearing the end of this review, and that means that we need to boil down the Devinci Marshall to its pros and cons. Let's make this real simple. What did you like about it first?
You know, I really liked that it was a good all-rounder, and it's gonna be a good bike for a lot of people in a lot of different places. And the other thing is that it might be the least expensive bike on test, but it's not the least capable, so it's definitely a pro.
Yeah, that's a huge pro, right? So that's the good news. What's the bad news?
You know, one of the things about the Devinci Marshall is that it's not, you know, that trail bike that you're gonna wanna take on really long days. That would be, you know, the Ibis Ripley. And it's also not the bike that you're gonna wanna take in the roughest terrain. You know, that's something like the Polygon or the Trance. So it's kind of a jack of all trades, master of none.
Yep.
And that's, you know, it
Sounds like me.
Yeah, definitely a con, yeah. And then that other thing is that RockShox 35 fork.
Right, yeah, that fork just felt a little inconsistent, especially compared to the Rhythm forks that definitely have a better damper and offer more performance.
Exactly.
Yeah. All right, Sarah, let's wrap up this review. Sum up the Devinci in a few sentences for me. What did you think of this thing?
I think this is a great bike for somebody who's getting into mountain biking. It's gonna help you get to the top of the climb. It's gonna get you into some rougher stuff on the downhills. It's gonna be a fun all-rounder, and it has great geometry, so it'll kind of grow with you. If you wanna upgrade some of those components, it's a great frame to hang them off of.
All right, that's it for the Devinci Marshall. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss any of our field trip review videos and our roundtable discussions where Sarah and I are gonna argue about which bikes we like more. We'll see you next review.